Welcome back to Things You Don't Know. This is another edition of Quick and Quirky. Someone sneezes, and without thinking, another person says, "Bless you." It is such an ordinary response that we rarely ask why a completely involuntary bodily reflex receives a religious blessing. We don't bless somebody after a cough or a hiccup.
And the answer is not as simple as the story that many of us have heard. There are connections to disease, religion, ancient superstition, and ideas about the soul. But people were treating sneezes as significant long before medieval Europe and its plagues. So today, we're going to be talking about why we actually say, bless you. Now, today, we understand the sneeze as a protective reflex. Something irritates the lining of the nose, and the nervous system triggers a rapid expulsion of air to help clear it out. Ancient societies did not have that physiological explanation. A sneeze happened suddenly, involuntarily, and for no obvious reason. That made it a perfect candidate for supernatural interpretation.
And we have evidence that sneezing was being treated as meaningful thousands of years ago. Among the ancient Greeks, a sneeze could be interpreted as an omen. In Xenophon's Anabasis, written in the 4th century BC, a sneeze occurring during an important speech was interpreted by the soldiers as a favorable divine sign. Scholarly studies of ancient superstition identify sneezing as one of the better documented forms of Greek omen reading. So the idea that a sneeze required some kind of special response is far older than Christianity. The Romans also paid attention to sneezing. Pliny the Elder, writing in the 1st century AD, mentions the custom of saluting people who sneezed. He even reports that Emperor Tiberius insisted on observing the custom. That matters because Tiberius lived roughly 5 centuries before Pope Gregory the Great, the Pope usually associated with the famous plague explanation.
So, whatever eventually became God bless you, people were acknowledging sneezes long before the medieval plague story. The exact beliefs varied. A sneeze might signal good fortune, bad fortune, divine approval, or a warning. So, it could mean a multitude of different things. But the consistent thing here was the idea that this sudden physical event meant something. That's quite interesting. Now, another old explanation involves the soul. For centuries, various folk traditions connected breathing with life and the spirit. A sudden, violent expulsion of breath could therefore seem dangerous. One widespread explanation says that people fear that a sneeze might cause the soul to leave the body temporarily. A blessing supposedly protected the person until everything was safely back where it belonged.
Yeah, and part of that mythology that I've heard is that when you sneeze, sometimes there's sort of a vaporous effect. You can see the particles of snot that you've
Yeah.
expelled, and people thought that that might be the soul. So there were variations on the same theme. Instead of the soul escaping, some traditions said sneezing made a person vulnerable to evil spirits. Others turned the idea around and said that the sneeze itself expelled something evil. In either case, invoking God provided supernatural protection. These stories are often offered as origins of God bless you, although we should be careful. They demonstrate old beliefs associated with sneezing, but they do not give us one proven moment when the English expression began. Now we get to the explanation that a lot of people have heard. According to the popular story, Rome was suffering from plague around 590 AD when Gregory the Great became pope. Now, Gregory definitely confronted a plague crisis. Historical scholarship records that in 590, he organized a major religious procession in Rome in response to plague and disease.
And the familiar story goes one step further. The story tells us that Gregory instructed people to say, God bless you, whenever someone sneezed, because sneezing might indicate that the victim had contracted the plague and was in danger of dying. And that version has been repeated so often that it is frequently presented as fact. But the evidence for Pope Gregory actually issuing such a sneeze related command is quite weak. The story is better treated as a traditional explanation, not a securely documented origin. Even modern summaries acknowledge that there are several competing explanations. There's also another problem with claiming that Pope Gregory invented the practice. We already know the Romans were formally acknowledging sneezes centuries earlier. So even if Christians during an epidemic began attaching the religious blessing to sneezing, they were building on a much older habit.
Yeah, the plague may have strengthened the association between sneezing, illness, prayer, and protection, but saying the custom began because Pope Gregory ordered everyone to bless plague victims makes the history much neater than the evidence really allows. The better answer is that several traditions probably contributed over a long period of time. So, Christianity gave the old custom a specific religious meaning. Instead of merely acknowledging an omen or wishing someone health, the response could invoke divine protection. God bless you. Over time, in everyday English, that was commonly shortened to simply bless you.
And today, the phrase often has little or no religious meaning for the person saying it. Someone can be completely non religious and still automatically say, bless you, after hearing a sneeze. The expression has moved from religious invocation into ordinary etiquette. Merriam Webster now simply defines bless you as something said to someone who has sneezed. English speakers often have a non religious alternative, Gesundheit. And Gesundheit comes directly from German and literally means health. English borrowed the expression in the early 20th century, although it had long been used in German speaking communities. So instead of asking God to protect the sneezer, when you say Gesundheit, you are essentially wishing the person good health.
And that basic idea, wishing health rather than offering a religious blessing, is extremely common around the world. In Spanish, one common response is salud. That simply means health. The Royal Spanish Academy specifically lists both salud and Jesus as traditional responses directed towards someone who sneezes.
Some Spanish speaking regions have expanded the tradition for repeated sneezes. The first may receive salud, health. A second may get dinero, money. And a third, amor, love. The exact pattern varies by region.
Yeah, French speakers commonly use ate suhat when addressing someone informally. The expression simply means to your wishes. Italian speakers commonly say salute, again meaning health. So
Very
across,
similar to the Spanish, right, Dr. Weaver?
yes, it is.
Yeah.
So across several European languages, the response has become a wish for health or well-being rather than specifically a religious blessing.
In Islamic tradition, the response to sneezing involves an exchange between the sneezer and the person who hears it. The sneezer says, Alhamdulillah, which means praise be to God. The listener may answer, Yaharmak Allah, which means may God have mercy on you. The sneezer then responds with another prayer asking God to guide and improve the listener's condition. The sequence appears in the Hadith collection Sahih al-Bukhari.
So, in that tradition, responding to a sneeze remains explicitly religious rather than simply becoming a polite acknowledgement. It also shows that linking sneezing with blessing is not uniquely Christian. Now, there's no universal rule that a sneeze requires a response at all. In some East Asian cultures, including Japanese and Korean settings, there traditionally has not been an equivalent automatic requirement for everyone nearby to say something after an ordinary sneeze. The sneezer may simply excuse himself or herself, or nobody says anything.
Which reminds us that what feels like basic manners in one culture can be completely optional in another culture. Americans may feel uncomfortable ignoring a sneeze. Elsewhere, responding to it may be unnecessary or even uncomfortable. So, there's one modern explanation that we can dispose of quite quickly. You may have heard that we say, bless you, because your heart stops when you sneeze. And I'm going to have to say, before we started doing this, I had never heard that before. But anyway, that's not true. That doesn't happen. A sneeze can briefly alter pressure inside the chest and affect the rhythm of blood flow, but the heart does not stop and then require restarting.
So, bless you is not congratulating somebody for surviving a momentary cardiac arrest. That explanation is folklore added much later to an already ancient custom. Okay, so why do we say bless you? There's no single proven origin. Ancient Greeks treated sneezes as omens. Romans acknowledged people who sneezed. Later traditions connected sneezing with the soul, evil spirits, illness, and divine protection.
The plague probably helped reinforce the connection between sickness and prayer, but the story that Pope Gregory simply invented God bless you during an epidemic, well, it's almost certainly too simple. The Christian tradition eventually gave English speakers God bless you. German gave us Gesundheit. Other cultures wish health, invoke God, offer good wishes, or simply say nothing at all.
And what survives today is a very old human habit, treating a sneeze as something worth acknowledging. This has been another quick and quirky edition of Things You Don't Know. Join us again for another short look at the history behind something we do without thinking.
And be sure to leave a like and comment and tell us some of the weird histories you'd like to explore. We'd like to hear from you too. Come back, folks. Bye for now.